Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Can We Talk About Your WordPress Projects? I'm Beth Livingston. Today, we're going to talk about project success. What does that mean, and how do you achieve it? Before we start, let me remind you, our little vlog here, Can We Talk About Your WordPress Projects, is brought to you by the WP Project Managers Academy, the only place on the web that teaches you how to get your projects done on time, within budget, with features that meet the client's business requirements without sacrificing profit. That's our tagline. It's a little long, but that's what we're going to talk about today, how to go about doing that. So let me go ahead and share my screen. If you're watching live in the Facebook group and you haven't given StreamYard permission to show me your name, please do. That way, if you have a comment, I can display it on the screen and it'll show your name. If you're watching on the Facebook page, that isn't necessary. But I would certainly love to know that someone is here watching me and I'm not just talking into the wind today. If you're around, please give me a comment. If you're watching the replay, just type replay so I know that people are actually watching these live trainings and getting some value from it. I hope. Okay, let me share my screen. What we're going to talk about today is really 6 WordPress best practices to ensure project success. The first, of course, is what is project success? The simple description for any project for project success, and most experts agree, the simple description is on time, within budget, producing an end product with features. But I think there are more elements that need to be considered when you're thinking about project success. Those are that there's little to no scope creep on your project, that again, you're on time, you're within or under your budget, but also you get paid for all you do, that you retain your planned profit margin, the client ends up happy and satisfied, and that end product, instead of just what was the previous thing said, the right features. Well, that's kind of vague, right? It needs to meet the client's business requirements. To me, that's what project success is. Now, if we're going to talk about project success, some of what matters is, what do clients care about? Do they care about these things? Well, darn skippy they do. Let me tell you how I know that. Studies have been done using online proposal tools like Better Proposals. That analysis has shown when clients are left alone to go through a proposal, and I never like that. I always believe every proposal deserves a walkthrough with the client. You shouldn't just be dropping things off or sending it to them in an email and waiting for them to respond. Those online tools will let you see where your clients spend most of their time. And here's where clients spend most of their time when reviewing a proposal. They spend most of their time on the cost and the investment, the second amount of time on the timeline, and the least amount of time on the actual solution. You can see by this quote from SCORE. SCORE is a training arm in the United States of the Small Business Administration. They say, you're far from the only company who can solve this client's particular problem. Your competitive advantage is in how you solve it. So it's best to outline your approach in your proposal. The audience can understand why it's unique and why it's the best choice for them. It's the approach that can set you apart. I promised you some best practices, but first let's review the principles that spawned the best practices. The 6 productivity principles for WordPress project success. These were taken from 6 productivity principles for software development that a former boss of mine created many years ago, but they still hold true. We've just modified them for web development. If any of you have been following me for any period of time, you've seen these over and over. We're just going to review them real quickly here. It's define the job in detail with a content first approach. Get the right resources involved. Estimate often. Some people think you only do the estimate at the proposal time and that's it, and that's not true. Break the job down. Establish and stick to a change procedure, and establish interim and final acceptance criteria. These are the principles that spawned the best practices and the techniques that we're going to go over now. So how can you achieve this project success? The very first thing is to make the customer part of the project team. Almost all the time, WordPress practitioners position themselves as the hired hand with the client as the boss. That is really a mistake. You need to make your client feel like they're part of the team, that you're colleagues working together to solve their business problem. Now, you might be thinking that, well, I'm the service provider and they're the client or the customer. And while those are the roles you're filling, you're not just building a website, you're not just pushing buttons. You are solving a business problem for them, and that is really huge. So, how do you make the client understand the team approach? Well, the first thing you want to do is position yourself correctly and make sure they understand up front that they're not handing this off to you to complete and then just swoop in whenever it's time to approve or reject something. They need to provide input and approvals all along the way, and they need to understand that. One thing we do is we use we whenever we're talking about the activities and the tasks. You're the project manager, the client is the subject matter expert or the project sponsor, and you need to position it that way. Mostly, this all comes down to setting the proper expectations for the client. You need to make it clear to the client that they are part of the team. And just like the rowing team on this slide, we're all in this together. And if one piece doesn't work right or it throws everything off, which only ends up costing the client more money. The rowing example is a perfect example because if one person stops rowing, it's going to really affect things. Or if one person starts rowing in a different direction, it's going to really throw things off. So you need to be brutally honest about the issues and the bottlenecks that clients often cause, not because they're evil or horrible or monsters. It's just because they don't know any better. You need to tell them what those bottlenecks and issues are that happen on other projects, but that it's not going to happen on your project because you're going to work as a team. So you might say something like, now, this is what happens on most projects, but, and then explain your processes. That getting done on time within budget is dependent on everyone adhering to the processes. Then you need to become the guide. It's sort of like the story brand method of marketing. You're not the hero of the story, you're the guide. Your client is the hero of the story. You need to assume your client knows absolutely nothing about the way web development projects work. I like to say this, whatever you think they know, deduct about 75%, because we live in this world every day and they don't. And it's not their fault. They have a business to run. So stop getting annoyed with them. If they don't understand the process, ultimately that's your fault anyway. You need to walk them through the processes, even several times if needed. Be really clear about when they're going to be needed and reiterate the importance of meeting the dates. Now, I've been doing this. In fact, I just had a meeting earlier today with the client that I'm working with right now. And we went through the project plan and I reiterated again how if you're not able to attend these meetings and get these things approved, then everything's going to bog down and we won't meet our dates. You want to make sure there's no conflicts on the client side with the planned dates and that they are agreeing to the project plan. I have them sign off on it just like anything else. And knowing full well that a plan is just a plan and it's most likely going to change, but we're going to have a process for changing it. We're not just going to go in and willy-nilly change things. You really need to create a written client management plan for your business that answers 3 questions. With what type of clients are you willing to work? How do you manage client activities? And what incentives do you offer for compliance? The question in red is because you need to manage the entire project. A lot of WordPress folks don't really understand that. They think they're just going to say, okay, here you have a list of all the content you're supposed to get together, go get it. And that's not the way project management works. You need to manage all of the activities, even the ones that are being completed by somebody else. But you need a plan for managing the activities that are assigned to the client. There's all kinds of things in client management about how to coerce, I don't want to use the word manipulate because that has a bad connotation, but you get what I'm saying, to move the client in the right direction. Your client management plan, if well thought out, can actually do that for you. Now, there's a lot of other elements to a good client management plan, but these are the primary questions. These are the primary things that you would need to have in there. Once you've done this, it'll give you talking points and items you might want to include in your proposal or contract. Establishes this client management plan with your client, like what's the turnaround time on deliverables and that sort of thing. So the project success factors for this first best practice is that by making the client part of the project team and making sure they understand that, you are going to increase client understanding of their role on the project. You're also going to have fewer project delays and the associated costs that are caused by the client. Okay, let's move on to best practice number 2. Use a two-step proposal process. That's what I call it, because what I teach inside the academy is that phase 1 is actually the discovery, which is the second part of the contract. In other words, we do a contract, we give a range of time and a range of cost. Then we do the deep dive, and then we re-estimate the project. We do another estimate and give that to the client. If it falls within the original range, great, no worries. If it goes outside that, then they've got to either approve it or reject it. If they reject it, we hand them the statement of work, that we give them the option to cancel. They don't usually do it because they've been working with you to know all the new things you found. What are the you can use to establish this best practice? Well, the first thing is to stop giving away your solution in the proposal. This happens all the time, especially with the new folks. They give way too much detail about the solution in the proposal. And remember how I showed you at the beginning of this, that that's really what the client cares about least. At proposal time, they might care about it later, but at proposal time, the thing they care most about is the cost and the timeline. So stop putting all the detail in the proposal. When you do that, you're basically allowing your client to take that proposal and shop it somewhere else. You're giving away your solution. They can get other estimates on what you came up with. And you shouldn't be putting that much work into something that might be ultimately rejected. And if you're just leaving the proposal with them, they're not reading it in that level of detail anyway, as that study with the better proposals I told you about showed. You want to also stop giving quotes. Okay, this is one of my pet peeves. I'm going to do a whole series on words you should not be using in your pitches and project documents. And quotes is one of them. A quote is different than an estimate. An estimate implies that it's not precise. A quote is like a fence builder. He can give a quote because he comes to your house, he measures your yard, which is a finite measurement. He knows the exact cost of the materials, and those are not likely going to change. But in our world, we're providing an estimate based on what we know now, but that could change based on what we find out. Here's the other thing. Stop trying to estimate things you don't know. There's no way after an hour and a half pre-proposal meeting with the client, you can capture every business requirement for that website. By that, I mean the business problems the website is intended to solve. I always leave design questions till way later in the process. I never ask what do you like and what you don't like, because it doesn't really matter. What matters is the way the website's going to be used to enhance the business. What are the business requirements? Giving a precise and final estimate in your proposal, you're trying to use that crystal ball approach to estimating. I'm going to tell you a better way to do that. Yes, position phase 1 as the discovery phase, like I said. Now, a lot of people will do this as a separate project, and that's okay. One reason I do it like I do it is because if that second estimate doesn't exceed the range I gave them in the first proposal, then we're still under contract and we're just continuing on to the next phase. The only time it becomes a no-go decision is if that second estimate comes in above the range estimate you gave them before. Here's a little quick animated graphic to show the two-step proposal process I use. First, there's the proposal questionnaire, where that's like our, pre-proposal questionnaire, where we ask all the questions about what it is you're trying to accomplish, what are the business requirements, and that sort of stuff. We drill it down with a visual sitemap so we can figure out how many pages we're going to need. That helps us figure out how much content there's going to be needed and to estimate that content. And that's one piece a lot of WordPress practitioners leave out, is that they don't consider the magnitude of the content when creating that estimate, and that matters. So we do that initial estimate stated as a range in our proposal. We give to the client, we will do the walkthrough with the client. If that's not approved, well, that's the end of the project. And I call this phase 0 because I don't really consider it a project until the proposal has been approved. If they do approve it, I go ahead and get the deposit for all of phase 1. Phase 1 is our deep dive discovery, where we might discover new requirements. So we add those new requirements to our list of activities and tasks. Then we adjust our work breakdown structure for those changed requirements and create the new estimate, which we present in a detailed statement of work. That's what we call it, the statement of work. It has a more precise estimate in it. Notice I'm not saying accurate estimate because there is no such thing, but we do include a more precise estimate. And then, does the new estimate exceed the proposal estimate? If it doesn't, we just move on to phase 2. But if it does, we give the client the option to cancel. If they don't cancel, we move on to phase 2. If they do cancel, we hand the statement of work to them that we've already been paid for, and that's the end of the project. Now, by using a 2-step proposal process, the project success factors you're implementing are you're not giving away your solution, you're getting paid for discovery, and it really helps to control scope creep. So your deep dive discovery equals more money. You have an extra advantage with that 2-step proposal process. If you really hate this client and cannot bear the thought of working with this client through the rest of the project, you can cancel too. You give them something they paid for. You can just tell them that, this just isn't a good fit, and here's your specification. You can go get someone else to do this. Best practice number 3, use a repeatable, measurable estimating process. The main thing here is, in the 2-step proposal process, is to stop guessing. People talk about the value-based estimate rather than an hourly based estimate. I start with hourly based because I got to at least figure how much time it's going to take and how much, based on what I value my hourly rate at, how much is that going to cost me in terms of what I think? The value to this client is huge, so I may add more to it. It doesn't necessarily have to be an hourly rate, doesn't necessarily have to be value-based entirely. I think this is worth $6,000 to the client, so that's what I'm going to charge them. That's never really a good way of doing things, unless you've been doing this a really long time and you know pretty well that's exactly what it's going to. The only way to get better at estimating is to keep doing it, to practice. You need to look back at mistakes you may have made the last time you did an estimate and make improvements. If each estimate is just a best guess, you can't really do that. Here's how to get better at estimating. We already talked about abandon that crystal ball approach. If you're a solution provider and not just a button pusher, if you're a consultant, then you can never really answer the question, how much do you charge to build a website? The answer is always you don't know until you have a full understanding of the client's business and business objectives of the website. You need to develop a repeatable, mathematical, defendable estimating process that you can improve over time. And when I say defendable, if the client ever asks you how you come up with your estimates, you need to have an answer. It's best to break the project down into activities and tasks so you know you're estimating for all of the stuff that really needs to get done. If you're not doing this already, you will be surprised how many things you're actually doing that you're not really charging for. When I do the first part of the proposal, we estimate at the activity level. For the deep dive, we estimate at the task level to come up with that more precise estimate. You want to estimate content first, as I previously mentioned, and we do this and create a rough order of magnitude to show to the client. That's like a vlog topic on its own, is how to create the rough order of magnitude and why you should estimate content first. Just know that you should. You should estimate often. As you drill down into the detail of the project definition and the specification, you need to keep re-estimating as you discover new things. You might not give all these estimates to the client, but it's the only way to determine if you're staying on target or not. You don't just provide one estimate at the beginning with the proposal. You need to make sure the client knows that you're going to track things to make sure everything is still on schedule and on budget. And if changes come up, you're going to estimate again. Let them know you're going to continue to refine that estimate throughout the project. You can't get better at estimating if you don't measure it and compare it over time. And that's what I spoke about before. Always review your last estimate before doing the next one. How far off were you last time? Why were you that far off? And then don't make those same mistakes in the next estimate. So this is a basic demonstration of how I do estimates. We have our work breakdown structure. I assign the resources because the resource that's going to complete the activity or the task may have a bearing on the cost and the timeline. Then we estimate the time it's going to take each of those resources to complete the activities and tasks they're assigned to. We multiply by their hourly rate, or if you're working alone, it just may be your own hourly rate. Add incidental time. This is something people often forget. Things like how long does it take you to pull together a status report or status meetings and those sorts of things. You got to factor all of that in. Then that's what becomes your estimate. And the project success factor for becoming a better estimator is money. Period. You're going to have more money. You're going to retain more of your project margin if you get better at estimating. Okay. Best practice number 4, use a content first development approach. There's a content first design approach and a content first development approach. You are not going to start developing outside of possibly doing wireframes and maybe a little bit of installation, testing, and that sort of thing. You're not going to do any development until that content is delivered. Because if you do, you're just going to be doing a lot of rework. Content first improves design because you're considering that content in the design. It speeds development, it reduces scope creep, and it prevents content collection bottleneck. The improved design happens because when content is discovered later in the process, it could impact the design, meaning that you're going to have to do rework. That means usually project overruns or eating into your profit margin. The goal is to try to have as little rework as possible. Of course, it speeds development because honestly, if you have everything already waiting for you up on a shelf, you've planned it out, you've taken all that time, and you've got all the content ready, how long is it going to take you to develop that website? Not very long at all. It reduces scope creep because the content and other changes you find really early on before you've drawn the line in the sand with the statement of work, you can incorporate those into the statement of work because you gave them a range at the beginning with very little extra cost or time if there is any. It prevents content collection bottleneck. And most people do it this way with the 50% up front, 50% at the end. A lot of times the project stalls at the content collection phase and nothing else happens. You never get paid for all that work because a lot of people will say, well, I'll just go ahead and finish the website. And then when they get their content, I'll just plug it in. But then the client disappears or goes away for months and months and sometimes years without delivering that content. So you never get paid for the second half of the project. Giant waste of time. How to implement a content first approach. The 2 main things is to restructure your payment schedule. So you're getting paid up front as you complete each phase. And also structure the project plan to make sure the activities and tasks align the things that happen before you get the content and the things that happen after you get the content. I use a big red line across the middle of my project plan that says content. Until that comes, I don't do anything below that red line. It's not entirely true. Sometimes I will do some of the research. I will do some of the testing. If I'm not exactly sure if this particular plugin is going to solve the problem, then I will go ahead and do that. The project success factors for this best practice is, we already covered them really, is that it improves design, speeds development, reduces scope creep, prevents the content collection bottleneck, and you could get completed on time. Best practice number 5, use incremental acceptance. What does that mean? First of all, let's talk about the difference between acceptance and approval. I try to use the word acceptance in place of the word approve, because I don't care if the client doesn't approve something, but if it meets the criteria we already agreed upon, that acceptance criteria, then it must be accepted. Let me give you an example. Let's say we have a set of test plans. Our acceptance criteria is the site is tested via the test plans and there are no bugs or errors. The site matches the look and feel of the printed materials, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's a checklist, right? Very specific stuff. But let's say they say, I don't really like that color of blue, or I don't really like the way that's laid out. You know what? Too bad. You already agreed to how it was going to be laid out. You already agreed to the colors. So I don't care if you like it or not. If it's on that acceptance criteria, you have to approve it. Or we do a change request to change it to what it is you want to change, and you're going to have to pay me for that. That's how it works. So if you break the deliverables into smaller parts, this is how we do it. We start with a sitemap, then we do the content specification, we do the functional and technical requirements. Then, and only then, do we talk about design. And all of those things together create the full website spec. There's still some more you have to add to the final statement of work, the pricing and all that stuff. If anybody watching this knows anything about project management, you'll recognize this as the waterfall approach to development, where one deliverable is dependent on the previous one. They build on each other. Elements of a good acceptance management plan. These aren't all of them, but these are some of the most important. It specifies the acceptance criteria for each deliverable and the final project. You do up front before you even begin. Well, you don't have to do all the deliverables before you begin the project. The website you do, but the smaller deliverables, as long as you have acceptance criteria for those deliverables defined before you start them, then that's all you need to do there. It specifies a turnaround time for the review and acceptance. It defines what rejection with cause is and what rejection without cause is. Rejection with cause is if they ran a test or there's something in the requirements that we missed. Maybe we were supposed to use a particular font and we missed it. Then that is rejection with cause. If they just don't like the shade of blue or they change their mind about the font, well, too bad. That is rejection without cause. Project success factors when using this method is you get this full website spec approved in a fraction of the time it normally takes because you've gotten all the pieces and the parts approved all along the way. The project success factors from this best practice are the clients gain a vested ownership up front. It increases team satisfaction because they know exactly what a set of requirements they're working to. It controls scope creep and it streamlines that final project acceptance. That's how it makes you money. And then the final one, I know y'all are tired of hearing me say it, invoke your change control process without exception. Once the line is drawn in the sand for any deliverable, meaning they've signed off on it, if there's a change, let's say you get down to the content specification and the client says, oh, wait, we need 2 or 3 more pages. Well, you've already approved the sitemap that specifies what all the pages are. Now that is going to be a change that requires the change control process. Here's a quote I made up myself. You see, I've even got my name under it. That not actively managing inevitable change inevitably results in lost revenue. It's just like flushing money down the proverbial toilet. You need to position project change as inevitable because it is. There's always going to be change. A plan is just a plan, and any number of things can change the plan. So stop treating change like it's a penalty because it's really not the client's fault. There's elements to a good change control procedure too. You want to use a change budget because that means you don't have to pad your estimate. You're going to set aside a bucket of money. Well, a bucket of invisible money that's in this budget that is only used for change. You don't get a deposit on it. You don't get paid any of it until the client or you requests a change that the client approves. The great deal about that is it puts the client in charge of that change. The other great deal is it reduces frivolous change requests. If you don't have a change budget, they will ask for request after request after request, which means you've got to negotiate each one of those changes. Well, it's going to cost this much. Well, I don't really want to pay that much. This is how much it's going to cost. But you've got that change bucket. You've already established there's going to be change. The client has to physically, well, not physically, but virtually move the money from the change budget into the project budget. That action of having to move money really reduces the frivolous change request. I'm not sure why, the psychology behind it, but it does work. And using a change budget means you magically always come in under the total project budget. You just have to provide a really good estimate, do a good job on the discovery, and make sure the change budget percentage is enough to cover the potential change. If there is so much change, you run out of money in the change budget, then do a change request to increase the change budget. The percent you choose is largely dependent on your client, how likely they are to be organized, and if they're going to request change a lot. I generally use somewhere between 20 and 30% of the total project budget we set aside as the change budget. Project success factors for this is it virtually eliminates scope creep because you're going to manage every single change request that comes in. You're not going to throw something in for free or agree to something you didn't really want to do because the client pressured you because you've already got a process in place. Let's do a quick review of what we covered. These 6 best practices for ensuring project success are make the customer part of the project team, use a 2-step proposal process or a separate discovery process, Use a repeatable, measurable, and defendable estimating process. Use a content-first development approach. Use incremental acceptance, and then invoke your change control process without exception. These things really work, guys. If you want to find out more about how to do each of these things in a more granular way than what I've had the time to share with you here, then I invite you to join the WP Project Managers Academy. There are two types of memberships. The free membership gives you the basics of WordPress project management. You get lots of free templates, checklists, and some done for you processes, but it's more of a DIY kind of thing. The premium membership gives you access not only to the Project Management 101 roadmap that you get with the free membership, but you also get the complete project management roadmap for WordPress. We give you lots more templates and downloads and done for you language you can use in your project documents and with your clients. We have lessons from industry experts on all those things that surround project management, the things that come before and the things that come after. So that's the end of this talk. If you're watching from the Facebook page and not within the Facebook group, I invite you to join our Facebook group. We have good discussions in there. We have live training every Monday. And on Fridays, we have a group chat where we talk about usually the training that we had on Monday. It's an open, informal, relaxing Friday conversation that we talk about just about anything having to do with our work, sometimes our personal lives. It's a nice way to decompress on Friday. What do I want to do here? Oh, here's what I want to do. I'm back. If you are in the Facebook group and you want to know what's coming up in terms of our live training or our Friday chats, click on the announcement link at the top of the Facebook page. I have a list of what's coming up and what we're going to talk about. On Friday, we are going to talk about, are you achieving project success? Whether you're achieving it with my method or not, are you achieving what you believe to be project success? If you are, what's your secret? If you're not, come listen to what everybody else's secrets are, because you just might learn something. On Monday, we're going to talk about the 3 most critical processes you need to have in place for project success. The following Monday, I'm going to share how to teach your client to shop around and still come out on top. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for joining me. Until I see you next time, always remember, stay productive, stay strong, and never stop learning. Bye, guys.